Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. Dwight Kay beat Jay Hoffman for the Illinois House of Representatives District 112 seat at the November 2010 election. During the campaign, Mr. Kay called for a line item audit of the state budget and for eliminating taxes, fees, and regulations that hamper businesses from growing in Illinois. He stated that the business climate in Illinois was toxic. He also wants to reform tort laws and worker compensation regulations. Mr. Kay has long been involved in Southern Illinois politics. Now it's his turn to come to bat as a decision maker. Today we'll learn more about what financial situations he found when he got to Springfield. Dwight Kay, welcome to Conversation.
Good to see you again.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And on such short notice, too. We appreciate your being here today. We're shooting today. Today is March 22nd. This won't air for a number of weeks, so if there's any discrepancies between reality when people are seeing it, that's why.
Sure.
Last time you were here, you were Representative-elect Kay. Now you are representative and up to here in all of the politics of Springfield. I would like you to tell the audience what it is since you were here last that you have seen and experienced.
Well, freshman legislator, you go through the process of a freshman in any aspect, and that has to do with the learning process of the system.
Do they have like a training course or a manual or something?
They have a training course. Actually, it was a 5-week program, and it was sponsored by the House Republicans. I think the House Democrats do the very same thing. Mm-hmm. Very beneficial because it kind of tells you the do's and don'ts in Springfield. That's over with now, and I have kind of lapsed into the process of being a legislator, albeit a freshman, and filed a number of bills which I think are pretty important to the district.
Mm-hmm. So the main problem in Illinois, what makes the national news, is the financial condition of the state. You've had a lot to say before you ever got there about the financial condition of the state, so would you elaborate now that you're an insider? What have you discovered?
Well, let me just start at the baseline. That's a good question. I think you mentioned, and I certainly did a number of times during my campaign, that I thought a forensic audit in the state of Illinois was terribly important. I don't think that's going to happen. The powers to be don't seem to want to go the direction of taking the engine apart, finding the broken parts, and putting it back together again, and I think that's unfortunate.
Is this the Speaker of the House you're referring to?
Well, I don't know that there's a real honest understanding of the process of a forensic audit, and that's part of the problem. The other issue has to do with the fact that I am not certain that we really want to know all the problems, which is a disappointment to me. I don't know that that's necessarily a Speaker issue. I think it's a system issue. Having said that, though, back to your question, the state of Illinois' financial situation is grave, and we have committees out right now that are working to pull apart the system to find out where we can make cuts and what programs need to be funded and how we're going to balance the budget. And it's a tough task, and I'll just tell you why. I am not finding a lot of people who have the discipline or the stewardship or really, I think, the desire to take this financial problem we have, the system that's in place, and pull it apart, like I mentioned before, taking the engine apart and finding the broken parts. I understand on the Senate side there has been some movement. I believe Senator McCarter has led an effort there with some of his colleagues to propose some cuts and some measures that would bring in to balance the budget. My approach maybe is a little different than Senator McCarter's, and here's what I'm saying about addressing the problems that we have. We have a budget that's proposed right now. It's somewhere in the $33–34 billion range, and we can't pay for that budget as we sit here and speak together today.
What is the income of Illinois, the real income?
Well, that's a good question. The real income of Illinois is They're predicting it this year to be somewhere in the $32 billion range, but that's with the tax increase that was imposed back in January upon business and individuals. But here's where I'm headed.
Well, that sounds close anyway.
Well, it brings you closer. I've heard my colleagues across the aisle say that to really balance our budget, we would have had to actually spend less and take in twice as much on the income tax increases from both business and individuals, and then borrow money. And that doesn't sound like a real good way to pull us out of the rut we're in financially. But what I've said is this. I've said that we need to look at approaching this crisis two ways. First of all, I think we can take 4 cents out of every dollar. And that's where I would start. I would look at every program and I would take 4 cents out. And when I got done taking the 4 cents out, I would impose, or I would try and convince people that the closest thing to a forensic audit we could come to needs to be done to eliminate bad programs, bad policies, bad procedures, as well as shutting down any agency or department that's not doing well, or at least pulling it back to some extent so it's not so large. I think that's the only way we're ever going to make ends meet in Illinois. You know, we're talking about spending more money now than we were last year, and we couldn't pay our bills last year.
Who's talking about spending more money
The
this
governor.
year?
The governor.
The newly elected governor.
Correct. Governor Quinn has proposed a budget that spends more last year, will spend more next year, and will spend more the third year. And we're looking down the road, I understand. But he's doing that with the tacit understanding that we have insufficient funds to pay for what he wants to do. Now,
What is it that he wants to do? What is all this money going to?
Well, we're not entirely sure because
we haven't done an audit.
Well, we haven't done an audit, but Governor Quinn does something that I wish he would change. He makes a decision on a Monday and changes it on a Wednesday, and then on a Friday, we're completely away from option A and B, and we're on to option C, and that's very hard for all of us to understand. He needs to state his position, take a direction, and move down that path, whether it be right or wrong, because he's confusing the process as opposed to facilitating a solution that we need to reach in and bringing this budget crisis to an end.
Well, that's an interesting point that most people probably don't even think about.
Well, the governor has, although he is not the chief budgeteer, so to speak, he has a lot of influence because he is the governor. And I think all of us are looking for management and leadership from the governor. And I think the conversations that others have had with him would be very similar to the one I'm having with you, that please, Governor Quinn, get on track here, stay on track. It's not that he can't make some mid-course adjustments, but stay on track and take us down a direction that we at least know you're going.
Do you have a personal relationship with the governor?
I do not. I have been to his office one time and he was not there. I have met him. I escorted him to the rostrum to give his budget address last month. I did meet him at that point in time. He seems like a delightful guy, but taking the personal side away from the political side, I think he is a nice guy. As far as the management style he has, I'm not sure he and I would see eye to eye on how to get things done.
Okay, so Illinois is still not really thinking in terms of there are huge areas in which they're spending money that is nice to have and that it's not absolutely essential, and yet let's just spend it anyways. That seems to be, from my distant perspective, what's being said here.
I think that's a fair assessment. I think there's a feeling that if you don't continue to spend at the levels that we have spent in the past, albeit that we couldn't pay for, that we move backwards.
To what? From what?
Well, excellent question. I mean, if you don't continue to look at ways to balance your budget, there will be a time when you don't have enough cash to pay your bills. They say you can't go bankrupt in a state, but the simple truth is, if you can't pay your bills, I think that's almost tantamount to being bankrupt.
On the other hand, if you were to proceed like the Wisconsin legislature did, What would you expect the result to be in Springfield or Chicago?
Well, there's a whole different dynamic in Wisconsin than I believe we have in Springfield. Let me just say this. I think it was a very poor move for their legislators to leave the state. I think they would have gained more. They would have had their voice heard. And politics works on a pretty simple method. It's an up or down vote, and you need to take those votes. To walk out, to say, I'm not going to do the job today. In fact, I'm not going to do the job until people get the message that we've left the state. That's an interesting concept, but it's really not a part of government. It's all right for people to protest. It's all right for people to walk out themselves as individuals. But
they can vote present.
They can vote present. Elected officials are put there to make decisions, and that's an up or down vote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, what I'm concerned about is there's three branches of government that are supposed to be co-equal: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. And yet, more and more, I see the judiciary telling the legislative, "Oh, you can't do that. Oh, you can't vote that way. Oh, your procedures are wrong." I mean, as I recall, that the executive department in the federal government and in the state governments are not subject to rules that are imposed by the legislature because they're a separate branch of government. And yet we have the legislative or the judicial branch coming in and telling people, "Oh, no, you can't have that rule." Or as in, I don't know what the situation is when this airs, but as of today, the Wisconsin judiciary or some individual judge said, "Oh, that vote you took in Wisconsin, that's no good."
Well, you're absolutely right. The judiciary serves a very important and unique function, but so does the legislature. And the distinction between the judiciary branch and the legislative branch is distinct in that the legislative branch is sent there by the people of their particular states. And
they're the first branch.
They're the first branch. And there's a first house and a second house in Springfield. And those two people represent the will of the people. When the will of the people is not heard or done, then those people may well be elected or may not be reelected to office.
That's how you got there.
That's exactly right. There was a lot of new people that were elected because they thought that the previous office holders had not done a very good job with respect to financing and paying our bills in state government. So it troubles me that we have judges stepping into areas which they may think they have a right to jump into and make decisions, but where the legislature kind of steps back and they're befuddled at the fact that our judicial branch is kind of overstepping their line of authority in dealing with some of the things that the people of the state want.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned earlier on that you have already proposed certain legislation. Let's just take up some of the things that you have proposed.
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing I need to tell you is there's three focuses I have in the state. The one is the budget issue. Mm-hmm. And I am sitting on a budget deficit commission that has been formed by Leader Cross, and we're just about finished with that process.
Who is Leader Cross?
Tom Cross is the minority leader
of...
he is the minority leader in the House. He's my leader on the Republican side.
And he's from?
He's from Plainfield, mm-hmm. I believe. So budget number one, that we need to balance this budget. Number two, we need to address our workers' compensation system in this state. And number three, we need to work very quickly and very thoughtfully about how we're going to fix the tort system. That is, the abuses that are occurring within our legal system in the state of Illinois. One of the first measures that I moved on was what became House Bill 131. And House Bill 131 is a cooperative, and it's not House Bill, let me correct that, it's House Resolution 131. House Resolution 131 took three House bills which I had, and they combined them into one resolution and said, we have a process, the workers' compensation system in the state of Illinois, which is not working right. We need to audit that, and we need to use every available agency and the Auditor General included to find out what's wrong, how we're going to fix this system, because it's no longer.
In your opinion, what is going wrong with the worker compensation program that you think it needs to be changed?
Well, I think the Belleville News-Democrat did an outstanding job in bringing to light what has happened at Menard Correctional Facility. Indeed, if you are to accept what they printed, and I think it's pretty accurate looking at the records, we have people who are filing workers' compensation claims largely for carpal tunnel, and in many of those cases you have people who were opening door locks maybe 20 or 21 times a day and claiming they had carpal tunnel. I don't have a problem necessarily with alleging you have it. What I have a problem with is when there is no substantive medical information that supports that. And also, what I don't care for is the fact that once we paid these people, we paid them TTD, total temporary disability, so they could be off a while to recover or have surgery or whatever the case would be. Then we paid them some permanency. And there is a process in the state of Illinois where once you do that, all of this information is recorded in the state database that is maintained by the Illinois Workers' Compensation System. Mm-hmm. What we learn is that we have no records of those awards. And that disturbs me a lot. That's taxpayer money. That's not state money. That's money we feed into the state to pay workers' compensation bills. So this audit is, we need to, again, strip down the workers' compensation system and find out what's gone wrong. Do we have a management problem? Is it right for the very arbitrators who are receiving awards to be granting awards? And why is there no paperwork to support the claims that have been filed? So Speaker Madigan, as I said, picked up the House resolutions that I had proposed. He said, I think this is a good idea, and he said, I'd love to co-sponsor this with you, and he did. It passed out of the House 111 to nothing, and I spoke to Bill Howland yesterday, who's the Auditor General, and Bill is on his way to getting the audit started, which pleases me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now, as to tort, first of all, a tort is a civil wrong.
Civil wrong.
And what is wrong with our tort system?
Well, first of all, it's not my job to pick on trial lawyers. There's an awful lot of data in the U.S. that is very alarming. But let me just tell you not necessarily what's wrong with Illinois today, but what's right with other states, and then I'll try and get back and answer your question.
Okay.
Indiana, Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri, and as of last Friday, Oklahoma are all states within, let's say, the Midwest region who have adopted omnibus tort reform bills. Mm-hmm. Now that simply says they recognize that within their states, trial lawyers had pretty much a free rein, and it was inhibiting those states' abilities to bring in businesses that create jobs. And that's my view with respect to Illinois. I understand that people need to be represented. I understand that. What I don't understand is why Madison and St. Clair counties have become the magnet for, as an example, asbestos cases. So last week we had subject matter hearings in Springfield, and subject matter, as you know, Lee, simply means I was given the opportunity to talk about 3 issues that I think tort reform matters that need to be changed for the sake of the state of Illinois and keeping jobs that we have here, businesses we have here, as opposed to those other states with reforms getting our business. The first reform had to do with joint and several liability. For many, many years we had good and balanced laws on the books. And joint and several liability just means this. In the state of Illinois, if you happen to be a defendant in a case and you're 1% liable and the other people have a percentage of liability that for some reason they're unable to pay, then you pay the 1%. It's called the empty chair doctrine. Mm-hmm. In other words, in Illinois, there's no empty chair because if you're 1% liable, you can pick up the tab, or you may be obligated to pick up the tab or the bill for a judgment for 100%. Nope. Nobody thinks that I've talked to, other than, and I'm sure some trial lawyers would disagree with me, that 1% liability should translate into 100% of the payment of an award. Nobody thinks that. At least the common sense folks I run into don't. So that's the first piece of legislation we had subject matter hearing on. The second has to do with collateral damage. Collateral damage is really a simple concept, but it's an expensive one for businesses. Let me give you an example of what happens here. if you're in an automobile accident, you have a $500 bill, and that $500 bill happens to be paid by your insurance company. Let's say they pay $400 of that. Your loss at that point is $100. Well, in Illinois, we allow it to be stacked. We call it collateral because when you get to a courtroom, you're allowed to claim your loss at $500, not $100. So there is a perception by business that that's not fair, that we should be paying only the portion that you have not been paid for if in fact we did something wrong, not double dipping or stacking an award. And that's a serious problem for businesses, doctors, hospitals, from the standpoint that nobody wants to be double dipped. Venue is the last reform I've talked about and did
That's
last
Madison
week.
and St. Clair County.
Well, it has to do with Madison and St. Clair County, and I'll tell you why it's so impactful upon Madison County. We have an asbestos docket here, and it's jammed. And the asbestos docket, everyone, at least from the trial bar side, will say, well, it's a great thing because we get a lot of fees, filing fees, for those people to come to Madison County. My take on that is, well, that's okay. The only problem is it's clogging the system, and the cases that really should be heard in Madison County are being delayed, or in some way they're not progressing along as fast as they could. I don't like the fact that we have people from New Jersey and New York and Maryland, Florida, coming to Illinois to have their cases adjudicated when they really don't have any business to be here. I think we ought to close our doors to those businesses that don't have people that are, not the businesses, but the plaintiffs who don't have a stake in Madison County. In other words, this is where the incident occurred, this is where their loss was developed. Then it's okay to be in Madison County. But to say we're going to invite everyone in here to try their cases because we have a system that allows it, and big awards that ensue, I think is bad for the state of Illinois.
This reminds me of the old river cases where if it touched the Mississippi River, they would file in Edwardsville.
That's correct. Good point. I had not thought about that one. Yeah, good point.
So what do you think is going to occur out of these three cases? Are we going to get new legislation, new law, or are we going to simply talk about it?
Well, subject matter is just talking about it.
And we got about 5 minutes here.
Okay. Subject matter is, as I mentioned to you, is just a way of the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, by the way, which I sit on, saying, you know what, we think you can make some good points, we'll put it on the record, and then you can come back and talk about it again next year. I was happy that the chairman allowed me to do that. What disappoints me is that there seems to be a lack of understanding about the perception of Illinois when it comes to the rest of the nation. I think I used the word toxic. You mentioned that before. Not only is it toxic, but a lot of people just think it's risky. They think if you come to Illinois or you continue to stay here, you're at risk. I operate a business where we do a lot of operations in 40-some states, maybe 43. There is no venue, there is no state that we fear more than the one that we're a corporation in, and that's the state of Illinois.
I remember Missouri had problems with venue, and because of that, a lot of businesses would never locate in the city of St. Louis.
I think I remember
because they
that.
didn't want to be in the St. Louis courts,
in the St.
Louis City courts.
City.
They'd rather be in some other court, whether it's St. Louis County or any other county, but they didn't want to be in the city of St. Louis courts because they knew that was, they just knew it was a loser.
Well, let me just say this. One of the things that other states have recognized that we haven't is that the trial bar and trial lawyers in the state of Illinois are a huge profession. It's a big profession. But we shouldn't allow the fact that trial lawyers are a big profession to in any way shift our perspective about the fact that equity, fairness, balance, and real justice is what we need to be looking for in this state. And that's what people looking from the outside in don't see.
Well, two things. One, there's a whole lot of lawyers in the Illinois legislature, so I suspect that there's a certain perspective problem there. And two, you were just talking about the state and the perception. Didn't you just raise the corporate tax
I didn't.
No, I mean in the state of Illinois. Didn't Illinois just...
Illinois.
And so that's saying anybody from the outside, yeah, if you want to pay more out of your limited profits, come to Illinois.
Well, very good point. That's another signal to the business community that we're not friendly. You see, what that's saying to businesses that might look to come to Illinois is, look, we don't have a balanced budget. We've had to raise taxes, and that's still not enough. We have to go borrow money. Anyone looking in is going to say, what is my next bill going to be? Is it another tax increase? Is it another big push for my bottom line to go to paying the, I guess the inefficiency is the best way to put it, of the state's budgeteers and those that keep our money?
Well, there appears to be considerable, at the state legislature level, a belief in wealth transfer.
Good point.
You know, that many of the legislators believe that, oh, well, if I see a pile of money, that I can go there, and they don't seem to have a concept of private property. I can go get that money, and I know people who need it, so I'll go get that money and then transfer it through me and give it to other private individuals.
And you're exactly right. There is that perception, and it's become more of a perception. I think it's almost become a pattern of conduct in Springfield. And I say that because this is a very simple analogy. Taxpayers in Illinois paid for all the bills that have stacked up and have gone unpaid once. So we didn't handle it efficiently. We didn't balance our budget. We took money from Peter to pay Paul. And all of this has led to a dysfunction that now has led Springfield leadership to say, we need to ask the taxpayer to go back and fund the system again to pay for the very bills they paid for the first time. And I have to tell you, nobody runs their home like that or their business like that. Doesn't happen.
And we're unfortunately just out of time. I would have asked you, and you might want to look this up, is find out what the interest costs on all this debt is.
If we pass the...
Yeah, unfortunately. We'll talk about that. No. We'll have you back.
Good, thank you.
Thank you very much. I've been speaking with Dwight Kay. He's the state representative from Illinois, the 112th, which is the Edwardsville-Glen Carbon area. We're out of time. See you next week. Thanks. Bye.